Is the screen visible now?
Yes, sir. It's coming up. It's coming up. Yeah, now it is. You'll need to do a present. Yeah, now it's perfect. It's perfect. Thank
Okay,
you.
let me. I can't see any of you if I put it in this mode. Is there a way I can also see?
Unfortunately, not, sir. There is.
Oh, okay. Okay, fine then. Okay, so, well, good evening, my dear young friends, and good evening to the hosts, and thank you for inviting me for this session on reaching greater heights in life. I would have preferred that I could see all your faces and present. It would have been so much more nicer that way, but we are all getting used to the virtual world. And happy Diwali to all of you. I hope you all had a wonderful Diwali celebration yesterday. So, the next half an hour or 40 minutes will be focused on certain things that have consistently helped some people be very successful in life. When I say success, it's not just material success, but also success in terms of how they handle their day to day affairs, their relationships with their family members, with their peers, at work, etc. So let's try this, and you can all look at this slide, and you don't have to unmute yourselves, but you can just read whatever is visible to you on the screen. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Okay, so I hope you all read what was shown on the screen. Most times, it so happens that we do mistakes in reading this as it is. I'm sure you all read it as Paris in the spring, once in a lifetime, bird in the hand. And I'm sure most of you have missed the duplication of the these, the A's, and the these in these triangles. There are actually two the's, two A's, and two the's again. Bird in the hand, Paris in the spring. The reason I'm showing this slide at the outset is to let you all know that in this world where we are so much more preoccupied with gadgets, being in the virtual world, our attention span is taking a beating. So, those teens, those young adults like you who can have a reasonably good attention span, well, sky's the limit to what you can do, because attention is something that's becoming a very, very precious and a rare commodity in today's world. Many times when young adults, teenagers are brought to us by parents, parents have their own version of what's going on at homes. Most times they have an expectation that we talk to the child, the adult, and tell them that, see, you have to sleep at a particular time of the night, you have to get up early in the morning, don't do late nights, don't party too much, and so on and so forth. And when you listen to the teenager, when they come separately and speak to you, they have an entirely different version of what's going on at home. It never happens that the gap in the communication between parents and their kids is so much more. It happens only during the teenagers. During teenagers, the way the brains are wired, it makes it very difficult for them to understand their parents' perspective. What happens in a teen's brain is that their accelerators, their emotional centers are brimming with energy like any other adult. But unlike an adult, unlike your parent, most times there is a balancing center called the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is that part of the brain which kind of keeps you keeps your judgment in check, keeps you in some form of balance, which helps you to not be in a haste and take decisions in a proper manner. But that part of the brain is generally not fully functional during the late teens or even the early 20s. And that's one of the reasons why, for the same thing, the way a parent looks at the situation and the way a teen or a young adult looks at the same situation is entirely different. And again, one of the reasons why sometimes wrong decisions in haste, in impulse, are generally taken during this phase of a person's life, which can haunt a person and which can damage a person's future for a very long time to come. So, once a young adult is aware of this, that their brains are wired slightly differently, I think it gives them a better perspective of how to look at things, maybe sometimes to take advice of their elders and see if that actually is in sync for the long term benefit of themselves. Again, this is how energy levels, time, and money match up in, say, a young adult's age, then a middle-aged person, then an old person. So usually when a person is very young, there is a lot of time on their hand, there is a lot of energy on their hand. But for an adult, well, time is a precious commodity. They might have money and energy. For an older person, there is a lot of money, but energy levels are low, and time also is precious, is in abundance for them. So the point again here is that as a young person, your strength lies in the time that you have, the energy levels that you have. So it is very, very important that you manage your time, your energy levels in the right way. I previously mentioned about how your brains are wired. So one of the things that you need to keep in mind is that if you use your energy, channelize your energy, which you have in abundance, in a positive direction, generally things can be very good. But these are the times when many teens make wrong judgments, take wrong decisions, and use their energy in a negative manner, which can be very detrimental not only to them but to their peers, to their families. Last I made a similar presentation about a couple of years back. I mean, I was checking about Facebook, and at that time, one of the stats which was very impressive about Facebook was it is the third most populated country. If you take Facebook numbers, how many people are holding membership in Facebook or have a Facebook app, it would be the third most populous country after China and India. And today, to my disbelief, yesterday I was just checking to update this slide, and then I found that Facebook currently has about 2.9 billion monthly active users. That means 2.9 unique members accessing Facebook, which actually no longer is the third most populated country, but it is the population of three entire continents put together. The whole of Africa, Europe, and North America. Imagine the number of people that are there in all these three continents. Facebook has so many users as on today. And well, there is a joke that is doing rounds in our part of the world. I stay in Andhra. Telugu is the language that we speak here. Recently, Zuckerberg changed the name of Facebook, or is intending to change the name of Facebook to what is called as Meta, M-E-T-A, pronounced as Meta, Metaverses and all. But Meta in my local language actually means grazing for the cows. So, well, it is metaphorical and symbolic that, you know, somebody who is on Facebook, it's just like grazing. I mean, as long as you are the audience, well, you are kind of trapped. But as long as you have an audience, well, you are enjoying a lot of other benefits, a lot of maybe fame, popularity, money, all sorts of things. So as long as you have an audience, it's different. But most people, these 2.9 billion users who are active on Facebook, are actually the audience and don't have an audience. That's the tricky part for all of them. And that's the meta part. That's the grazing of cows kind of a thing, where you continuously have something or the other to keep you occupied. And once you go in, it's only one-way traffic. You can just enter, and then, you know, you lose track of time. That's the way their algorithms are placed. That's the way they have they spend billions of dollars and on keeping all of us hooked on to their apps. This was in 1990s when your TVs were large. You might not have been born, most of you, but when we were in those times when, you know, the adults were small size, but for every gadget they had to run to a different place. If you want a camera, it would be in some cupboard. If you want an audio player, you have to go somewhere else. If you want to order food, if you want to eat food from outside, there was no other option. You had to go and eat food outside in a restaurant, or you had to fetch food from outside. That's why people were maintaining reasonable fitness at those times. Nowadays, you can see that the gadgets have shrunken in size, but at the same time, human beings have enhanced their body mass indices. The obesity indices have gone up. More people are having issues with weight and metabolic conditions like diabetes, cardiovascular conditions, etc. People have forgotten eating fresh food like tomatoes and salads. They remember more of Zomato and Swiggy and all of those things. So all these things are transitions from what life was maybe a couple of decades back. And again, this has implications for young adults, because in many countries now, and in India it's still better, but in the West, especially in the United States, obesity is a big epidemic. It has attained epidemic proportions, and a lot of young adults, middle-aged men have obesity as a major concern. Again, well, a picture speaks 1,000 words, and this is such a picture. Many times, because of the way we are so preoccupied with the virtual world, it so happens that our judgment just gets blocked, and we do not even know what is the right thing to do sometimes. There are many of my clients who tell me, and it can happen not only to patients but to all of us, that you actually want to check something and you open your phone, and then one gets lost, and you ultimately forget why you have actually opened your phone. That's the kind of distraction that the gadgets, the screen times that we have today can lead us to, and that's something that one needs to guard themselves against. Now, traditionally, we have always been told communication is good. The more you communicate, the healthier for relationships, the healthier for a person as it is, the better his mental health is, the better he feels, and so on and so forth. But they have done an experiment, a study on some people for about a couple of years, and this actually looked at using internet for communication purposes. Does it actually have a positive or a negative effect? And this study, after the results came, it was actually termed the internet paradox study, because as much as we all think that internet increases the communication, brings people closer, the results in this study were actually to the contrary. It showed that excessive use of internet for communication actually declines participants' communication with family members in the household. They don't feel very comfortable talking face to face, even with their own family members. Also, a decline in the size of their social circle. So they could have a very small group of friends on the virtual world, and they are very preoccupied with those friends. They have similar interests, and they are just very comfortable only with that group and don't feel very comfortable going out of that circle. Also, that there is an increase in depression and loneliness. And as I mentioned, it is called a paradox because participants use the internet heavily for communication, which generally should have positive effects, but the study found otherwise. This study is available online for you all to go through. Again, an important reason why we need to use internet and the screens and put them in their own limit. Otherwise, there is every chance that technology will enslave us and make us more lonely and more depressed. Again, we have a de-addiction center that we run in our place. It's called in class Shantivan, and we have a lot of teens, young adults who are admitted there with various addictions. It could be addiction to weed, which is cannabis or marijuana. We see a lot of patients in our area. It could be to, say, porn. It could be to internet gambling, online gambling. A lot of issues that can happen online or offline in terms of addictions. But one of the things about addictions that I wanted to share with you, a small story, so you understand, because you are at an age where addiction could be a major issue. So let me share this small story so you get a better idea of what addiction could be. There was a 18-year-old, very enthusiastic guy on the beach, and he was with a group of family members and friends. And the waves were a little high that evening. But when he looked at the waters, the ocean waters, he noticed that there was a very nice rug. A rug is a very nice quilt kind of a thing which was floating in waters, a black colored shiny rug. And he was very tempted, and it was not too much away into the waters, so he could not resist his temptation. He immediately ran towards the waters. It was a little deep, but he started running towards it, and he wanted to take that rug because there was nobody there. So he thought he could take the rug and he could run back to the shore and use the rug. Fair enough. But as he ran into the ocean waters, as he came very close to that rug and he held on to the rug, he suddenly realized it's not a rug, but it's a bear, bear, an animal. It was somehow lost in the waters, and it was there. And it immediately, you know what a bear hug is? A bear hug is a very tight hug, and bears are very, very popular for doing that kind of a hug. It's a very tight hug. That's how they kind of suffocate their their victims and they eat them for the meals. That's the way bears generally attack their prey. So he was attacked by the bear. People on the shore did not know what was happening. They were still thinking that because they could not see the bear in completion. So they were still thinking, why is this guy there and he's not able to come back with the rug? But this fellow was stuck in the waters and the bear has tightly held him. It wouldn't let him go. And people on the shore were shouting, now if you can't get the rug, it's okay. You please run back to the shore. You have to save your life. And this fellow is just helpless. He can't even breathe. He can't even say a single word. And the bear has tightly hugged him. So this is how addictions are. Most teenagers, when they start experimenting, exploring a substance, it could be weed, it could be any other drug, they would not, or even a cigarette for that matter, or alcohol, they would not, nobody wants to get addicted. They would all take it for fun. They would take it as a one-off thing. But most of the times, the chemicals in these drugs are such that it's a trap, it's a one-way traffic. You can only get into the system, but you cannot get out of it. As much as you want to get out of that tight hug of addiction, it's not possible because your brains get rewired very easily once you start using any of these substances. I mean, it's whenever I do presentation, I make it a point to tell about how addiction can be very deadly and very lethal, because I see a lot of young adults admitted with us, very nice families, very bright kids, but once they get addicted, they're simply helpless. As much as all people think about them like, why did they do this? They are such weak-minded people and they shouldn't have done this. We look at them like victims of these deadly chemicals. But well, it's a trap. It's a one-way traffic, and so it's very important that young adults like you, if you have any friends who are getting addicted to this, you should be extremely careful and guide them in the right direction. And also make sure that you stay away from such friends and such peers. I'm sure you all know what IQ and EQ are. IQ is intelligence, how intelligent you are, how much you can mug up, or how much your logic is, how your calculation abilities are, all those things generally associated with the left part of the brain, and they're all good to earn a good rank, a good degree, a good seat in a good university, maybe get a very good job. But is that enough for life? Well, definitely not. There is another thing called as EQ, or emotional quotient. I'm sure you all heard of a lot of people who are gold medalists and who were very good in their studies, but once they came into their lives, their actual real lives, they were actually failures. They were failures in the way, in their family lives, in their professional lives. They were just not able to deal with day-to-day affairs and relationships and work and so on and so forth. So that's EQ. EQ is emotional intelligence. It helps one to run their life smoothly, negotiating the suffering and misery of life. At the end of the day, life is not all highs, but there are a lot of lows one needs to negotiate as well. And EQ, having a good emotional quotient, good emotional awareness, helps one manage their own emotions in a balanced manner and to negotiate the lows of life. Because even if you don't have the highs, certain lows can take a person's life totally, and that's why it's very important to have a proper emotional intelligence as well. In fact, IQ is like the tip of the iceberg. The major part of a person's life is not determined by his intelligence, but by his emotional quotient. That is how well and how balancedly he is able to negotiate the lows of life, the impulses of life, the temptations of life. Those are the things that are subsumed under emotional quotient. This was an experiment conducted many years back on kids who are as young as 5 years, 6 years old. So basically what they did is they gave a marshmallow. Marshmallow is a sweet. Once you keep it in your, once you're offered that, you can't do anything much other than gulp it off. That's how sweet and that's how tempting a marshmallow is. So what they've done is these researchers have given these 5-year-old, 6-year-old kids one marshmallow and gave them an instruction. We will come back to you. Until then, if you have the marshmallow in the hand, you get a bonus marshmallow. If you eat it by then, well, of course, you're out of the study. So obviously for a 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, it's not easy to resist the temptation of not eating the marshmallow and waiting for somebody to come and tell them, okay, now you can eat or I'll give you another one. So most kids had gulped the marshmallow immediately. There were some kids who resisted the temptation and they were given an extra bonus marshmallow. Now, what these researchers did is they followed up all these kids for about 20-25 years into their lives, and they found that those who had been able to postpone the gratification, postpone that urge to immediately experience pleasure, those who were able to postpone pleasure immediately, those were the ones who had lesser school college dropouts, those had got into better jobs, they had stable lives, stable marriages, so on and so forth. An analogy would be you have an exam tomorrow which is important, or you have an interview for which you need to prepare tomorrow which is important, but at the same time you also have a close friend's uh, party, he's throwing a party, or you might have a cricket match where India is playing a semi-final. Of course, this T20, I think our chances are less, but you have a nice match coming up, a cricket match, and you have an interview which is also quite important. So sometimes it's important not to give into the temptation of enjoying that match or that party for that time, but more important to look at the longer term picture and maybe focus on the interview or the test that one has. So the sweets experiment, the marshmallow experiment it is called, is a very important study which has looked into this part about how a person who is able to postpone gratification, postpone seeking pleasure immediately, tends to have higher success and stability later on in their lives. Again, this is a slide taken an year back, but I was looking up at the 2021 happiness report. So the World Happiness Report actually grades, ranks countries according to the happiness quotient in that particular country. Unfortunately for us as Indians, currently we are ranked 139 out of 149 or 150 countries which were polled into that survey. Doesn't reflect very good on our country. We come from a very ancient tradition, and we have some of the most ancient scriptures to help us guide through life. But unfortunately, the happiness index, the happiness quotient in our country seems to be abysmally low, and there could be many factors. That's a talk for another day, but it's really sad to see that the number of suicides, the happiness quotient in our country, all these rank very, very low. Even countries like Pakistan, some of the countries like China, which are communist countries, Islamic countries, Christian countries, and we rank very low compared to a lot of other countries. And it's really very sad when we look at these figures. And this has been a steady downtrend for our country. And there may be many reasons for that, but as the youth of the country, it's very, very important that you all play a small but a significant role in helping our homes, our communities be more brighter, cheerful, and happier. So in that case, let's look at what are the things that actually constitute happiness. Why are some people happier and why are some people always nagging and very dull and low, and you stay with them for some time, you also feel as if you are quite dull and upset. So again, studies have shown that happiness, how happy a person is understood through three factors. Genetic factors, that is what genes you inherit from your parents, constitute for about 50% of a person's happiness. So, well, those are things that one cannot do much. Genes are inherited and nothing much can be done. But there is another 40%, which is intentional activity. Intentional activity is the kind of thoughts that a person has, the kind of actions that a person has, the kind of relationships a person is into. Those are the kind of things that constitute 40%. The other 10% is outside circumstances. It could be money, marriage, house, the kind of city you're born into, the country that you're born into, the religion, the caste that you're born into. These are the other things which are outside circumstances, which constitute about 10%. Now, this is very interesting because many times we think that there are a lot of people who tell us that I am born into a very poor family, my parents are uneducated, I come from a very small town, there are not many opportunities there, and that's why I'm not so successful, and that's why I am unable to do well in my studies, and so on and so forth. But research time and again has shown to us that most of the times the outside circumstances have a limited role in how they shape a person's future, how they shape a person's happiness. Most of it is genes, which is outside our control, but a lot of it is also what you intentionally do, how a person shapes his own life, what kind of thoughts he wants to keep in his head, and what kind of friends, relationships he holds close to his heart, and those kind of situations, friends that he keeps at bay. So, intentional activity at 40% is often underrated and misunderstood and not utilized properly. Again, a couple of slides on happiness. So, generally, our brains are wired in such a way that you want to have the next iPhone, the next best car. I think you're too young for cars and all, but at least you want to have the latest gadget. You want to go and do your graduation or masters in the best city, in the best university. So there is always a craving for the next best thing, and I want that. And again, that's a trap that our brains put us into. That's called a hedonic treadmill, and I'll come to that in a bit. But the point is, as much as our senses seek pleasure, that is very transient, and we always want to seek more pleasure. You eat tasty food, you want to have more food and more food, and you watch something really nice, you want to do more of it. You have a good gadget, you don't stop there, you want something more on top of it. And that's the way our brains are wired and trap us, and that's what is a hedonic treadmill. A hedonic treadmill is something like this. When if you run even at say 15 kilometers per hour on a treadmill, you wouldn't reach anywhere, you would still be running on the treadmill. And that's what happiness feels like, especially if it is pleasure connected, especially if it is connected to a person's senses, if it is connected to the material aspects of the world. And that's why it's very, very important that you choose the right kind of tools to keep you happy, to keep you motivated, to keep you inspired, and not rely on materialistic aspects, because they will never give you an end. They will never give you full satisfaction. There is always a craving for that which is missing, for something more, and that's how our senses uh, make us believe to do things. So this is a slide on generally how our brains are wired to value things. So I'm sure you all have experienced this. When you do not have something, you crave for it, and the value of it is very, very high in your minds. When you have it, you take it for granted. That's it's mine. So there is a sense of position on it, and it could be a person, it could be a thing, but there is a sense of a position, and it generally is taken for granted. It could be a relationship, but after one loses it, again the value of that increases. Now again, all of these are very important foundations in the way a person trains to think his own self. So once you train yourself to value the things that you have, it automatically has a very good bearing on the way you are able to process information in a positive way, in a healthy way. Again, I'll narrate a small study which was done to understand if money can really make a person very happy. So the idea was, when I made this presentation, certain things are about success, and certain things are about happiness, because I think at the end of the day, if somebody has to be really successful, it also means that he's really happy. Just having materialistic things in their kitty may not mean much when it comes to happiness. In fact, there is a story of a millionaire. Nowadays we have billionaires, and we even have some trillionaires, but once upon a time, it was when I was a kid, when there is somebody who is a millionaire, especially millionaire in dollar terms from the United States, for example, it's a big thing. And then there was a story about a very big millionaire in New York area who ended his life. Everybody was very shocked, because he's a millionaire, he had everything at a very young age, he established himself quite well. What led to his suicide? And then he wrote a suicide note in which he mentioned that I have experienced everything in life, and I had everything else, all the material comforts. I don't know what is left in life now. So I thought I will have to try death to just get the kick out of life. And there is nothing else left for me in this life to do. I've tried drugs, I've tried all kinds of things, friends, girlfriends, all kinds of things. And now the only thing that can make me feel complete is probably death. So let me try that. So that's the context in which I thought it's important for all of you to understand that money is important, but is it important, so important that it is enough to keep a person happy? So they did this study on these two groups of people. So what happened was they had a group of people who won lotteries. Lottery is like a jackpot. You don't have to put in any effort. Suddenly one day your name comes in the paper and you get an amount of money out of nowhere. So they collected all these lottery winners, and at the same time they went to a neurological hospital and took some people who suddenly developed weakness in both their limbs. They can't walk, they are wheelchair bound, they are called paraplegics. So they took these two groups of people and they enrolled them into the study and looked at their happiness after 1 year. So one group of people who won a jackpot, who won a lottery, a lot of money suddenly comes into their bank account. The other group of people, paraplegics. Paraplegics means who've been paralyzed and wheelchair bound due to a sudden health issue. It could be an accident or whatever reason. So after 1 year, they looked at the happiness quotient for both these groups of people. And well, what does common sense tell us? Definitely, the ones who won the lottery must have been very happy all through the year and even now. The paraplegics, poor people, they lost both their limbs, so obviously they would be even sadder, is the common sense perspective. But to everybody's surprise, they found that the paraplegics were actually much, much more happier than the lottery winners. Everybody was like, how can this happen? It's just unbelievable. There is something wrong in the way this study was conducted. And when they went into the depths of these results, when they analyzed the results more deeply, they actually found that the paraplegics, once they've suddenly lost their limbs, they started to value even the small things in life. It could be the smell of the raindrops, it could be the beautiful sunrise, it could be small things that happen every day that make one smile, a baby talking the first words, all those kind of small things which made these paraplegics look with awe, and they were enjoying every small moment in life, and their expectations were also very low. They were very happy. Lottery winners, what happened to them? They started comparing with the richer ones in their community, in their society. They were hankering for more. So get the next best car. We have to compete with whoever is in our neighborhood. We should be richer than them. We should make more money. Let's try some more lotteries. Let's make some more easy money like this, so on and so forth. So they basically, many of them actually lost a lot of their money, or even if they retained their money, they lost a lot of peace of mind because they were constantly hankering for more things and more material benefits. So this is one of the landmark studies that helped researchers conclude that money is important, but beyond a point of providing for a person's needs to a very comfortable level, adding zeros to the overall net asset value of a person doesn't really add to the happiness. If it added to happiness, you should know that all rich people in this world must be the happiest people, all the richest countries must be the happiest countries. And I just mentioned about the millionaire story also. So it simply doesn't work like that. Again, this is a slide that I like most. There was a study which was conducted, and youngsters like you were asked to pick the most important things in life. At your age, when you're given a bouquet of options like this and you're asked to pick up the most important things in life, well, again, I can't see you. I would have immediately picked up what your minds were telling. But anyway, most times the ones which are picked up are money, education, places I live, health also, many times career. So these are the things that most people, when this is told in meetings like this, in sessions like this, most of the times money, education, health, career, these are the things that are picked. But the two most important things, if you have to pick two most important things in life at your age, because you are at the crossroads of everything. I understand that people, the group is between 18 and 25, so you are at crossroads of everything, and a lot of important decisions need to be made in the next few years for all of you. So the studies concluded that amongst all these things, the two most important things in life are, one, of course, health. No doubt about it. Without good health, physical and mental health, there is nothing that one can do. So health, of course, is paramount important. What is the next important thing? Most important thing. All of them are important, but most important thing is the spouse, the partner that one picks, the companion that one picks. Now, for all of us, it might sound very trivial that what is there, that's not a big deal. If you have all the other things in place, that is not a big issue at all. But many studies have time and again showed that the partner that you live with, you choose to live with, you tend to get married with, that's a very, very big decision in life, and it can make or break a person's future, his happiness, his success, everything. They say if your health and your spouse are proper and you're happy with them and they are in sync with your ideologies, with your lifestyle, and etc., etc., 70 to 80% of life goes on quite smoothly, irrespective of other things. If those two things are not in place, no matter how much money somebody has, no matter how much of education somebody has, it really doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so well, again, one of the things that I am very, very particular about discussing with youngsters like you is about this. When, you know, our adults, we are in a culture where we are always told, you should be like that, you should be like Sachin Tendulkar, you should be like a Steve Jobs, you should be like an Elon Musk, nothing less than that. You should do more, you should work harder, you should go and reach that kind of a level. Albert Einstein, you all know, theory of relativity is equal to mc square. He's a genius, and he once mentioned, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. A monkey can only climb trees, a fish can only swim. You can't ask a fish to climb trees and compare its merit by its inability to climb a tree. In today's world, this happens quite often. It's very, very important that at your age, you know what interests you most. You know what your skill is, what looks like play to you, but for others, it's hard work. That's what you have to pick up on. All other people are taken. Steve Jobs is taken, Elon Musk is, you are not taken. So you make sure that there is only one copy of you. And with all your good things, with all your negatives, with all your vulnerabilities, with all your weaknesses, you are still very, very unique. And it's very important that you maintain this uniqueness. To shine in this world, to make a mark for oneself, it's extremely important that you be yourself, because nobody can beat you at that. To copy Steve Jobs, if you compete, there'll be lakhs and lakhs of people competing, and you simply will be beaten. But nobody can beat you at being yourself. And if you have to take one take-home message, this is the most important thing. With all your strengths, with all your vulnerabilities, with all your weaknesses, be yourself. And once you stick to this mantra, to this formula, there are high chances that you will end up doing things which are like play to you. But for me or for somebody else, it's like hard work. Oh my God, I can't do that. But for you, it's play. For you, it's a game. It's fun. When will you end up like that? Only when you be yourself, only when you're true to yourself, to your strengths, to your weaknesses. And so it's very important that we don't compare ourselves with anybody. It simply does not make. This is a one-man game. In the end, this is a one-man game. So it is up to you to do your best to the abilities that you have. Don't ever compare with an X or Y or Z. And even if somebody compares, well, ignore that. Ignore that in full heart and just move on. Again, another important thing that is a mantra again, that, you know, there is something called as Pareto's principle. Pareto's principle states that we all do a lot of things. Every day we do hundreds of things, but there are certain things which give us a lot of value, which give out very good outcomes. There are certain things which you do in abundance, but nothing comes out. That's the Pareto's principle. It states that 20% of what you do accounts for 80% of the outcomes. So it's very important that you understand what your 20% is. What is that 20% of the thing that you do that creates maximum impact? Once you understand what this 20% is for you, do more of it and more of it and much more of it. And things will obviously be much, much better for you. So that's Pareto's principle. Rather than focusing on everything you want to do and you want to, in this world, to do so many things and to say yes to everything doesn't make sense. You have to focus on that 20%. That 20% which gives you 80% of the outcome of your efforts. And once you know that, do more of it and cut down the rest of the crap. That's called Pareto's principle. Again, very interesting. And then a couple of slides on stress. Stress is a bad word nowadays, but in psychological terms, stress actually is not such a bad thing. It's not such a villain in our lives. In fact, a little bit of stress is always good for maximum outcome. If there is no stress at all, there is absolutely no performance. If there is a little bit of stress, there is high performance. But if the stress becomes too much, like you see on the right side of the graph, then obviously there is too much anxiety, mental health issues, sleeplessness, addictions, and all of that can happen. So if you ask me if there should be any stress if you have an exam in the next 15-20 days, well, yes, a little bit of anxiety always helps. Anxiety is a God-given gift to help us work to our maximum potential. So a little bit of anxiety is not a problem at all. But obviously it is a problem if it interferes with your sleep, if it makes you very much on the edge, if you are not able to enjoy anything, you are not able to eat, that's bad. That's when you need to seek the help of an expert. But if it's a little bit of anxiety, it always helps to optimize your performance. And when you're stuck with something, when you're very anxious about something, you're trying to solve something, some problem, you're trying to write a project, simply not moving forward, you're stuck. Now, the best way to come out of those kind of situations is to take a break. Take a walk, drink some water, listen to your favorite music, just forget the problem totally. Don't even have it in your mind. Just do something that gives you happiness. Do something that gives you even pleasure for that matter. Eat your favorite chocolate or whatever gives you happiness. But leave the problem for some time. And invariably, the way our brains are wired, you will find a solution for the problem when you re-face that situation. You could think of a nice holiday that you went on. You could do anything but keep the problem at bay for some time and don't get stuck with that and just brood on that for too long. This was from my MD days when I won the gold medal for being the best outgoing student at NIMHANS Bangalore. That's where I did my MD from. So when you have your lows, which all of us do have, it's very important to look at some of the things that you worked hard for and you achieved success. Those are the kind of things that will inspire you. You don't have to look at any hero's story or anything like that. I'm sure your life provides a lot of opportunities for you to do that. There must have been tough moments which you overcame, or even from your family members, your father, your own people. Look for inspiration from yourself or from your near and dear ones. And I know meditation is extremely powerful, but whenever I talk about meditation, I am always circumspect because most times it's not possible. It comes with a lot of positive benefits, but most people are not too keen on doing meditation. But there are very, very good reasons why one should meditate. It can calm down a person. It can make a person think more sharply. It can make a person process information faster and in a more balanced manner. Meditation is a great thing. Even if you can do a 10-minute meditation, studies have shown that their brains kind of calm down. Their brain metabolism is at the peak stage and they are actually able to do well in cognitive and memory related tasks and so on and so forth. There are multiple studies. So meditation is tough, but that's why all good things in life are sometimes tough. But for those who are able to do these things well, the results will be equally very, very nice. This is our meditation room at our rehab center, and we try to involve all our young patients there in mindfulness meditation or various forms of meditation depending on their inclination. A couple of slides on time management. In the next few minutes, I'll conclude. Well, you all had situations. Even when I was a student, I remember when we have 3 months to study for an exam. 3 months, you plan for 3 months, like you make a lot of timetable and you try to follow that timetable. But at the end of the day, most of the things happen in the last 3 days. That's Parkinson's law. So work kind of expands to fill the time available for its completion. As much time as people have to complete their work, they tend to pile it up to the last moment and try to complete everything in a haphazard manner, in a shoddy manner in the last minute, put a lot of pressure on them, so a lot of anxiety. So this is something that most people do. But if you are able to understand this and try to rework this formula and balance your work and the time, then nothing like that. Your quality of life, the results will be astonishingly positive. In today's world, we always try to have an opinion on something. There is a WhatsApp group, a Snapchat group, and you say something, somebody says something on your, and you want to comment back on that on your Facebook page and stuff like that. Well, this great person, he's an author, who's Mark Twain. He once said, never argue with stupid people because they drag you down to their level and then they beat you with experience. So never waste your time on arguing on trivial matters. They may not even have any concern for us on international politics and on nuclear proliferation and UN policies, and all those things don't make any sense to us. It could be anything, but as long as it doesn't make sense to us, to get into an argument and waste time on that doesn't make sense. It's the biggest time waster for most youngsters in today's world. Finally, something on peer pressure. There is a saying which says birds of same feather flock together. Now this is a small story where there were a group of frogs in a well, and they were all trying to climb the well, and it was very slippery. Obviously it was very marshy, muddy and slippery. As a frog tries to climb the well, the other frogs would immediately say, this one will fail, no doubt about it, it will definitely fall down, it will fail. Listening to so many frogs saying the same thing, every frog which attempted to climb the well would fall down after trying for a few meters. Finally, there was one frog which managed to climb the well despite all the shoutings and all the negative comments that were made by all the other frogs, all the wise frogs which were around in the group, their peers, their friends. This frog climbed to the top of the well. Very surprising. But the fact of the matter is that that frog was deaf, and that frog did not understand what the other frogs were telling. It just thought that everybody was probably cheering for this frog to do well, and so it just went on and it reached the top of the well. So moral of the story, your friends decide who you are. So if you have 4 friends, I know about the other 4 of them, I know who you are. That's how important your 4 friends are. The closest ones decide who you are, what you will be doing. It's very important to choose the right peers, the right friends. Always, we know that people work in groups. So a successful friend group is always doing good things. There are a group of friends who are always doing bad things and not so good in studies, not so good in life, and so on and so forth. The other thing is, don't bother about what other person's opinion about you is. It really doesn't make any sense. Don't listen to other people telling you that this is not possible, you can't do this and all of that. If you want to take anybody's opinion, take the opinion of that frog which has actually climbed the well. So if you want to do a task, there is no point asking a friend who has never tried it. You have to talk to somebody who's already done it successfully, and then they are the right people to guide you. So be very sure that you're not swayed by the opinion of bad peers, and be very sure to choose the right peers, the right kind of friends, because you will be like your friends. So choosing the right friends is of paramount importance. Well, that brings me to the end of my presentation, presentation, and maybe now I will hand over to Maya and Srila, and they can take it from here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thanks for your patient listening.